It has been a rough few weeks in the United States for relations between African Americans and the police. Lives have been lost on both sides of the conflict. The police feel unsupported, and the series of caught-on-tape shootings of black suspects have once again raised the uncomfortable question: is the criminal justice system rigged against African Americans? To help us understand, I recently talked to a man who fights hard to reform that system and has written a heartbreaking book about it, Just Mercy. Bryan Stevenson is the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative and a law professor at NYU. For his work, Stevenson has won a MacArthur Genius Grant, amongst many other honors. Listen in. Bryan, pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
I want you to tell the story of really what got you involved in this crusade that you were on. You're a young lawyer, and you decide to get involved in the case of a guy, Walter McMillan, who was wrongly accused of murder and on death row when you met him, in a town that ironically was the town that is supposed to be the place where To Kill a Mockingbird was set, right? Yes. Harper Lee's birthtown.
That's right. Well, I think it was that disconnect that really got my attention. When I finished law school, I was shocked to know that there were people on death row literally dying for legal assistance. We don't provide lawyers to even condemned prisoners. And I met Walter McMillan in Alabama. He was convicted of a crime that took place in Monroeville, the very community where Harper Lee grew up, and wrote To Kill a Mockingbird. And that community loves the story. They romanticize it, they celebrate it, they put on plays about it, and yet they were completely indifferent to the plight of a black man, wrongly accused of killing a young white woman, convicted in a trial that lasted a day and a half. The jury returned a verdict of life, but judges in Alabama, elected judges in Alabama, have the authority to override jury verdicts of life and impose the death penalty. And so the judge, whose name was Robert E. Lee, he overrode the jury's verdict, imposed the death penalty for a crime this man did not commit. And it was a challenging case because he was with many people when the crime took place. The entire black community knew he was innocent, but because they were there with him, they felt convicted, they felt condemned. And I think what we have done in this country with mass incarceration, with excessive punishment, is not just incarcerate a lot of people, convict a lot of people, condemn a lot of people, but we have marginalized whole communities. We have demoralized whole communities. In Walter McMillan's case, tells that story. We fought for 6 years to win his freedom. Ultimately, the evidence came forward, and he walked out free.
And you point out that in 1972, American incarceration rates compared to European countries, and it looks pretty normal.
Yes.
And then it just skyrockets.
Yes, that's right. Throughout most of the 20th century, our level of incarceration was relatively steady. We averaged somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 people. But in the late 70s, when this war on drugs kicked in that had been declared by Richard Nixon, we see the beginning of an era which has defined us as a society that is one of the most punitive in human history. We now have the highest rate of incarceration in the world. We went from 300,000 people in jails and prisons to 2.3 million people in jails and prisons. We have 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's imprisoned. 6 million people on probation or parole, 70 million Americans with criminal arrest.
And the racial component of this is real. So you point out, Department of Justice study just came out.
Yes.
Tell us what it says.
Yes, well, the race statistics are the most dispiriting. The Bureau of Justice now predicts that 1 in 3 black male babies born in this country is expected to go to jail or prison. The statistic for Latino boys is 1 in 6, and that's a shameful reality that was not true in the 20th century.
So when you look at those videos that we've all seen in the last year of police officers seemingly entirely unjustifiably shooting, killing, arresting young black men, you're not surprised?
No, I think there is a narrative of racial difference in this country that we've never confronted. You know, I think we live with a kind of smog in the air. Our history of racial inequality is a kind of pollution. And we haven't done the things you need to do to affect a different, healthier environment. We've just not had conversations that you need to have. We're a post-genocidal society, and we haven't done the things you're supposed to do to recover from a genocide. There were millions of native people on this continent who were slaughtered by white settlers when this country was formed, and we haven't talked about that. And it made us indifferent to the victimization of African people who were enslaved. And I don't think the great evil of American slavery was involuntary servitude. I think the great evil of American slavery was the narrative of racial difference that we created to legitimate it. We made up this ideology of white supremacy in America, and we haven't confronted it. South Africa, they recognized to recover from apartheid, there had to be truth and reconciliation. In Rwanda, people will tell you they can't recover from the genocide without talking about all of the damage. In Germany, if you go to that nation, you see a landscape where there are markers and monuments at the homes of Jewish families that were abducted during the Holocaust. The Germans actually want you to go to Auschwitz and Birkenau and reflect soberly on that history. And because of that, we have a different relationship with Germany than we would have if they refused to own up or talk about the Holocaust. But we do the opposite in America. It's the 21st century. There's not a single place in this country where you can have an honest engagement with the history of lynching. There are hardly any places where you can deal honestly with the legacy of slavery. We have this landscape that is littered with the iconography of the Confederacy, which we romanticize. My state of Alabama, they celebrate Jefferson Davis's birthday as a state holiday. Confederate Memorial Day is a state holiday. We don't even have Martin Luther King Day in Alabama. It's Martin Luther King / Robert E. Lee Day. And this disconnect has got to be challenged if we're going to actually become a society where that presumption of dangerousness and guilt doesn't undermine the aspirations of so many people.
Bryan Stevenson, good to have you on.
Thank you very much.